Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, what's happening, Rush Nation? We're back. I think it's Tuesday. Isolation has properly kicked in Stocks' household. 61 square meters shared with my 18-month-old and wife is proving a challenge. Luckily, we do live on a river, so we can walk along the towpath to get our 1 hour's exercise. But I'm not going to lie, Rush Nation, being an outdoor man, this is starting to tickle a little. But today, it's me and Murf as always. This could possibly be our only show this week because of Corona and stuff going on. Finding timings to get together a little difficult because Murf is still working and I'm on full-time daddy daycare. But I am joined by Murf today. Big man, how you doing, fella?
I'm good. This is day 9 of self-isolation, where my wife had developed a cough. Pretty confident it's not COVID and she's not got any of the other symptoms, but we followed the 14-day advice, although I did pop out to just the shops today, just to get a few essential items. But other than that, it's the only time I've left the house in 9 days, which I was dealing with quite well because I've been at home now 4 weeks and it's been fine until the little rascal that is my 8-month-old son has been a bit of a handful today for the wife. And so upstairs I'll be on a call with a client and you just hear this screaming.
Yeah.
No, what's that? And I was like, just ignore that, don't worry. No, I was more playful than that. It was fine. I just said, that's just my son. He's probably hungry or something if he takes after his dad. He's probably hangry. Clients like it, so it's all good. Like I said, at least I'm still working and I have a purpose every day. So it's hard work, but it's good. So, but it's enough about what our situations. They're not going to change much over the next month, 2 months, however long this goes on for. But we do have a really special guest today. I'm super excited for.
Oh, straight up. Well, you said stuff that isn't going to change too much over the next coming weeks. Something that is going to change is the NFL rookies. The draft is imminent. It's upon us. You've dropped mocks. I've dropped mocks. Everybody's dropping mocks all over the place. It's what the people want. So we're feeding them every day. But we thought, well, who knows the draft better than, well, pretty much anyone. So we've got the co-host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast and senior draft analyst with the Draft Network is Benjamin Solak. Benjamin, welcome to 5 Yard Rush, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, guys. I appreciate y'all having me on. It's cool stuff.
Appreciate you coming on. It's a real honor and pleasure. Been reading your content a lot ever since you started, really, with the Draft Network and when it began. So you guys do an amazing job, and the podcast is amazing. This is a real sort of fan favorite for me.
No, I'm glad to hear it. And yeah, I mean, like this is our second draft we get to cover. Nobody really told us it was going to be virtual reality by year 2, but here we are already. So we're just kind of rolling with the punches best we can. It's been a wild ride. It's always a crazy draft season. We're just excited to keep doing good stuff.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you've really raised the bar this year. I didn't think it would get much better than last year, but you guys are really, really killing it. The mock draft machine is incredible. The subscriber content is unreal. It's so good. And it's definitely the best $30 I've spent this year.
Hey, I'm glad to hear. I'm glad you've enjoyed it, man. That makes me happy to hear.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I pass on my thanks to JC. JC was on this podcast last year, and as a fellow Bucks fan, we nerded out a bit, and yeah, you guys are killing it and setting the standard.
Thanks, man.
How you doing with isolation, Benjamin?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's funny when you cover the draft. February, March, and April are isolation months, whether or not you want them to be. You know what I mean? Just kind of choice taken away from you. There's too many players to watch, too much work to do, and film to get through. So, always working from home for me, like it's pretty standard. I only pretty much go out for groceries now, and before that, I was pretty much only going out for groceries then anyway. So, it's a lot of it I'm pretty used to. It was funny to see everybody kind of pop out with their work from home tips when this all got started, because I was like, my work from home tip is do it. That's what I do. I ain't got many tips for it. I'm used to it by this point. So yeah, it's pretty standard for me.
So essentially, if you didn't have a news notification on your phone or ever turn on the television to see the news, it would just be standard living for you.
Well, yeah, no. So my it's funny because my wife produces local news here where we live, and so she comes home every day, and she is like, hey, this is what's happening. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't know that if you weren't here. Like, oh, the governor talked. That's nice. Like, I just, I'm super shut off. So she keeps me locked in on the day to day, which is helpful.
Where's home, Benjamin?
I'm in Southwest Michigan. I'm in a little town called Kalamazoo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I've always wanted to go to Ann Arbor. I have been to Michigan, but I've never made it to Ann Arbor. It's definitely something I want to do at some point.
The big house is something else, man. It's a good experience.
Yeah, no, I'm desperate to do it one day. Probably should have done that before I had kids. but maybe I'll find an excuse. Luckily, I have an office in the US, and I might just take detours when I'm over there. They're in New York, so I might just fly places and go do what I want to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I can't speak to traveling the U.S. as a first timer, but Michigan's a pretty state.
No, it's awesome. Like I said, I've been there. So I've actually been to most US states. I lived in the US for 6 years, and before uni, me and a few mates, we did a bit of a road trip there, and kind of extended and extended and extended, and before you knew it, it was about 3.5 months.
That's awesome. I'm like, yeah, you've probably been to more states than me then, to be frank.
Yes, but I don't say I've done many of them well. So
Yeah,
I do
right.
like to try and pop back and do some. But I still have some friends, and lucky enough, I can hop on sofas whenever I get a cheap flight. So I do plan to get to Tampa this year, and to definitely plan to get to New York. Well, it obviously depends what happens. It might be next year, but yeah.
Yeah, right.
So Benjamin, how did you become a draft enthusiast? What was it about the draft that hooked you so bad?
Yeah, I think the draft is one of the best, if not the best way to learn about the game of football, just period, right? Like, I think that as the players transition from college to pro, if you're going to understand which players are good, if you're going to try to figure out which players you want on your team, you're going to have to understand something fundamentally about how football is played, both at the college level and at the pro level. And then beyond those fundamentals, you start to get into specifics. And as is always the case with learning and discovery, you come to learn one thing and then you realize there's two more things you didn't know, right? So I think that, like, I initially got into I was covering sports. I was working an Eagles beat. I was doing just covering Philly sports. But once the season ends, you start covering the draft, and every year that became more and more of a focus of mine until eventually I was doing the draft full time. And I mean, it's getting paid money to watch football players. It doesn't get much better than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's like the dream job.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, we have a good time.
So, with you living up in Michigan, who's your NFL team?
So I grew up in Eastern Pennsylvania, so I'm a big Eagles fan. Like I said, I was working in Philadelphia media before I started doing the draft beat. So that's my team, and then I ended up in Michigan because of school and whatever and whatnot. But Eagles are the squad.
We had another Eagles fan on recently, Murf, didn't we?
Brian Drake.
Yes.
Nice.
He had an Eagles Christmas tree. Do you have an Eagles Christmas tree, Benjamin?
No, I got a couple ornaments, but not a whole tree. That's impressive.
He's got a whole tree full of ornaments in his man cave, and yeah, it was quite a lot. And then we also have Ross Tucker on, and he obviously does the pre-games for the Eagles. So we've done quite a bit.
Yeah, Ross is the man.
Yeah, he is. He's an awesome guy. What do you, in terms of then the Eagles, and I take it you went to Michigan. How difficult is it for you in NFL season, because you've got Michigan, you've got the Eagles. I know they're different days, but do you find because of what you do, you draw more to college ball? It's like, well, what happens with the Eagles? This is what happens when the college season's over. I'll just sort of tune in and see what happens. Or are you like as religious a fan of the Eagles as you are watching college games and things like that?
Yeah, so I actually went to University of Chicago,
okay.
Which is yeah. So, but for me, right, Saturday's a work day, Sunday's a fun day, right? So Saturday, you watch football, and then the objective is to get an eye on all the games, get an eye on all the prospects, be able to comment throughout the week on how players performed. I watch those games differently than I watch the Eagles. I watch the Eagles obviously with that still in mind, because I have to watch the game from that sort of analytical break it down perspective. With that said, I have a lot more passion for them. I grew up rooting for them as a child, so I get unreasonable about them the way any other fan would. So it's a different watching experience, I feel like.
Yeah, it's awesome. Mm-hmm. So based on that, do you get hooked into fantasy football as well on Sundays, or?
I'm so bad at fantasy. I'm the worst. And it's so well, here's the thing. If you, and this is what I tell people, if you're working from a draft perspective is the complete opposite of the fantasy perspective. The fantasy perspective is, okay, it doesn't matter how actually talented this dude is. It doesn't matter how he runs his routes. It doesn't matter how strong his hands are, what his contested catchability is like. Does he get targets? Does he get volume? Does he get catches? Are they down the field? Does he score points? Does he get touchdowns? Whereas draft work is, okay, it doesn't matter if he scores points. It doesn't matter if he's getting catches or targets. It doesn't matter if they're throwing him the ball and where they're throwing him the ball, in the red zone, on third down. What are his routes like? What's his contested catchability like? What's his hands, right? So one's traits-based and one's results-based. And obviously there's overlap. Players with good traits end up having good results. That's what we believe. But the players that I think are good, because I scouted them, may not be used by their teams in a way that's conducive to fantasy, but because I think they're good, because I scouted them and I thought they were good, I end up thinking they're good in fantasy and they're not. So I'm really bad at fantasy. So I play it like for fun with friends, but it is not my area of expertise at all.
How did you get on last season?
I won the TDM Fantasy League, which nobody anticipated. I got Lamar and McCaffrey, and then I didn't do anything for the rest of the year. So I got my guys. I love Lamar, so I was happy with that. I got Chris Godwin as well. I picked him in front of Trev just to be annoying, and then Godwin turned out to be pretty good. So yeah, so that was a good run. Besides that, I didn't finish significantly for anybody in any league. I think I'm in like 2 or 3. But I won the TDN one, so I get to hold that over staff.
That's amazing. So who's in that then?
That's everybody that's on the content team staff, and then we have a couple people who do our fantasy staff that are in that as well, like Paige and Jake and Jamie. Rob, our creative guy, was in there. So yeah, I think I played Joe in the finals, beat him.
Oh, nice.
Played Kyle in the semis, beat him. Yeah, so pretty good time.
Oh wow, Paige must have been really annoyed being the fantasy expert.
Oh yeah, right. That was the thing is we were like, y'all shouldn't be doing this because if y'all lose, it's gonna be real bad. And especially to me, who self-admittedly is not good at fantasy whatsoever. So, yeah, it was a win though. Win's a win.
I love that.
I love it when the underdog wins the title. It's just such much a sweeter victory, isn't it?
Sure, yeah.
So Murf, why don't you explain the UK fans mock draft we did and how Benjamin's going to break it down?
Yeah, so we pulled in about 50 folks here. So we did a live mock draft with Paul Brown, and he hosted it at the Hippodrome last year. We had a load of fans, and we've used the TDM mock machine and sent you guys some pictures. So obviously with it not being possible to do that this year, took it upon myself to do a virtual mock draft, which we posted all the pics on Twitter on a separate handle, but we retweeted all of them on our handle. Got about 50 fans, so some people had 2 GMs, some people only had 1 GM, and effectively we went through and did an entire 7-round mock we did it in 10 days. It went pretty quickly. I thought it would slow down a lot in the later rounds, but actually they would say they went a lot faster in the middle rounds. I think people kind of knew at that stage who they kind of wanted. So it was amazing to see that kind of knowledge. So I guess from this perspective, it'd be good to hear, because I picked for the Bucks, Stocks picked for the Broncos,
unless it was really bad, and then I didn't pick for the Broncos.
Right? Yeah.
Well, you had a co-GM. He just went AWOL.
He's my silent partner.
So the literal sense of silent partner. We didn't hear from him for the whole draft, and then Lee, who's our sort of AV guy, he picked for the Dolphins, and passionate Dolphins fan. And Ash, who's one of our writers, he picked for the Steelers. So based on, we'll start with those 4, because you can actually publicly shame us for our picks and how we did. What were your sort of first views of, first of all, the overall draft and how each of us got on?
Yeah, no, it's really cool to see, like, the 32 team control and everybody individually with the team going through a mock is a ton of fun. And, like, with trades available and using the simulator, it's sick. So this is the cool stuff. This is the stuff we geek out about. So I like it a lot. Miami, the trade up to Tua makes sense. I think it's if you want to, it's something you might have to do. It hurts to lose 26. That's a good pick, especially when 18 is Josh Jones. I'm not a big Josh Jones fan at all. The value in day 3 is nice. I think Tyler Biotish is appropriately drafted. LaMichael Pirine. I like Alex Highsmith a fair bit. With the amount of capital that Miami's coming into the draft with, especially in the early rounds, for you to rock out with Tua, Josh Jones, and Antoine Winfield it hurts, right? You look like you can get a lot more. So there's a lot of eggs in Tua's basket for Miami, but it's what needs to be done if you're going to secure the guy. Tampa with the big trade back from 14 to 25 because there were none of the top tackles on the board. It's bold. It's risky. You go and you grab AJ Epinesa, who I think is going to be interesting in terms of Todd Bowles rushing him sub package wise. I think that could be fun. I know that the point was made that he replaces Carl Nassib, which is a good point. They've obviously poured a lot of resources into that defensive line, and I think Epinesa still has a role there, which is good. Once you make that Epinesa pick, though, you're up against it with making sure you get an offensive tackle, making sure you get a running back, and making sure you get a wide receiver 3. And that was well done. Lucas Niang at 45 is great. Jonathan Taylor at 46 is great. And then Quintus Cephas at 161 is a good pick. So I liked the way Tampa approached it. Even though you had to have that trade back, you didn't get the offensive tackle in round 1. You were able to scramble, which was good. Pittsburgh, I think it sucks. You don't have any capital, right? You don't have anything to really parlay with. You're struggling to make moves. I know they moved back to grab a couple of later round picks according to the little trade table. Damon Arnett at 49 is good value. Jalen Hurts, the thing about Jalen Hurts is he better than Mason Rudolph? Probably. Is he good enough to be a starter? Probably not. And so you didn't really solve your problem. You just introduced another body to the mix that you're going to debate with Devlin Hodges and Mason Rudolph and now with Jalen Hurts as well. You kind of just got a lump of guys who might be it but probably aren't, and that's being stuck in purgatory. And then the Moss and Bocce picks make sense on day 3. I think Moss is probably going to go a bit earlier than that, so it's nice to get him there at 124. Who was the last one? Denver? Yeah, Denver. This was a good draft. This was an impressive draft. I think that obviously everybody expects and wants to see a wide receiver, one of the top 3 guys, end up in Denver. That was impossible relative to how the board fell here. So you go after it and you grab Javon Kinlaw, who makes a ton of sense for Vic Fangio, being a penetrating 3 technique, being a guy who can 2-gap with his length. You didn't get that wide receiver, so you come back and double dip Chase Claypool and Tyler Johnson. I think they're looking for a field stretcher, and you probably don't have a real field stretcher between the 2 of those guys. But that's okay. I think that they're both appropriately drafted for their talent level. I like Tyler Johnson a fair bit. I love the attention on the offensive line. 4 picks on the offensive line. Lloyd Cushenberry, Shane Lemieux, and Justin Herron's a personal favorite. I don't think Trey Adams is going to stick in the league. I think he's too banged up. But I think you're looking at potential starters in Cushenberry and then definitely a depth guy in Justin Herron and Shane Lemieux as well. And then Harrison Hand at 181 is great. I freaking love Harrison Hand. He's a really nice developmental corner. Fangio gets a lot out of those guys who can be physical in off-man coverage. So I'd say Denver's probably my favorite out of this group. None of them were bad. Denver I think they had a good thumb on the pulse for what that team, what that coaching staff likes.
Nice.
That's a massive shock to me, if I'm brutally honest.
Stokes is the one guy who claims he doesn't watch a lot of college ball. He's actually still going through the process of picking a team.
Listen, sometimes distance helps. You know what I mean? It's important to be able to, especially if you're not an experienced scout and you don't do it all the time, you don't want to be too close to these guys because you want to be able to take expert opinion and think about things in new ways. You know what I mean? When we get this deep into prospects, it's easy to miss pretty clear fits and pretty clear predilections. You get too close to it, you miss the forest for the trees. So doesn't surprise me.
No, he did really well.
I thought my initial pick of Javon Kinlaw was good, considering one of the big 3 wasn't there receiver-wise. And then I had a little bit of help at corner from Murf. I'm going to put transparency out there. It was late, and I didn't know who to go for. And Murf said Hand was the guy, so I grabbed him.
Yeah, Murf was right.
Yeah, Murf generally is right most of the time, if I'm honest, which stings a little. But the fact he helped me makes it better. And this is the first year I've properly dived into players in the draft because of writing for our website and stuff. I've had to take a bit more of a deeper look. So I'm learning names every day, and it's a really good I think it's a really good process just to look into the names, even just for fantasy football, and you just look at the offensive side of the ball, unless you're playing IDP, but just to get the names coming in, it's good to learn the names and somebody might not draft them in your league, and you might be able to pick them up thinking, well, actually, I read a bit of his draft preview and like the way they were talking about him, and nobody's grabbed him, so maybe he might be something late on, but you never know.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think, I'm lucky enough I went to university in the States. I kind of got to live the college experience, and I think that's a much easier way to get involved. It's harder over here, I think, to stay involved because the games are so late, especially the good ones. Games here, like typically the sort of showpiece games will either be like midnight or, even later. So it's quite difficult to follow it. Then if you've got the NFL season going on as well, you think, okay, that's fine. That's Saturday, and then Sunday, if you're staying up for Sunday night football, that kicks off at 1 a.m. And then if you're staying up watching Monday night football, that's another 1 o'clock. So it's 3 days in a row. But we do have ESPN player over here. That makes it a lot easier to watch games retrospectively on commutes and things like that. So
and college game day that's pretty much the main thing we see on ESPN over here because of the time difference. And even college game day is a whole load of fun just watching that for a few hours.
It's great. It's great for me because there's always an SEC game in there as an SEC guy. So, but no, it's good to hear the breakdowns. But I as a Tampa fan did want to trade up, but people weren't taking my calls to allow me to trade up to get that offensive line. So I hope that it falls very differently in a few days' time.
Yeah, right.
3 weeks' time. As long as we get one of the big four, I'd be happy with that. I mean, I heard Scott Reynolds today took Mekhi Becton on your pod, and that would be the dream if that happened. I'd be over the moon.
Yeah, Mekhi Becton, any of the four tackles, but Becton at 14 particularly is really exciting because Becton's a high floor dude because you can't be that big and be bad. Just don't happen. You're too hard to get around physically. So I like I said, I think not going off the tackle in the first round for Tampa is ballsy. But if you're able to get Lucas Niang in the second, that's all right.
Yeah, it was kind of the way that the board went, and I didn't like anyone at 14 enough to take them at 14. So I appreciate that. Let's so based on what you have seen with some of the other teams, who do you think did really well with their capital or creating extra capital? Whose kind of draft stand out?
My favorite draft is Buffalo. I don't know who did Buffalo's, but they knocked out of the park in my opinion. Dobbins at 54 is great value. That's my running back one. And I think Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire are right up there, but Dobbins is my preferred. And I think they need a bell cow. I think you want Devin Singletary to be a change of pace guy. Michael Ojemudia is probably my favorite tier 3 corner that we got, and he's a lot of what Sean McDermott likes in that he's really clever. He's intelligent. He's got great vision. He's going to be good with his eyes in the backfield, even when he's in press, and he has the tools to do that. Khalid Kareem makes a ton of sense for what McDermott's been successful with. They just brought in Mario Addison. He's so good with those bigger defensive ends, 265-plus pound guys, which is Kareem's style. Antonio Gibson is my pet cat. Like, he's my dude. I don't like anybody better than like this kid. I mean, ridiculously explosive, rack skills, yak skills for days, ton of contact balance, offensive weapon, return value is great. Colt McKivitz, I don't like that pick, but whatever. James Prochet at 207 is awesome. I think that gives you a good slot option other than Cole Beasley. And Prochet can play out wide as well because he's a good route runner. He releases nicely. Robert Landers at 239 is crazy value relative to what I have on the board. He's a rotational guy, but that's what they need. It's more rotation on the defensive line. And he's solid across the board. And then Cole McDonald at 248 is just for fun. You know what I mean? Like, McDonald's absolutely freaking nuts. Like, he's probably not going to stick on the roster because he's done take care of the football, but his arm talent's insane. So he's a lot of fun, but you're talking about giving Buffalo a core of Dobbins, Ojemudia, Kareem, and Gibson. That's pretty much a Ben Solak draft right there. So Buffalo was my favorite draft in terms of the value they put out. I was impressed with what Green Bay did. I thought that they did relatively well. I thought the Rams and the Patriots both did a good job with their limited capital, but Buffalo takes the crown for me.
Nice.
Go on, Murf.
I was going to say there'll be some people listening to this that'll be pleased. I know the guy who drafted for the Rams is actually a Bucks fan. We couldn't find a Rams fan for days as much as I tried. So he watches a lot of college, and he was desperate to get some additional picks, and he worked really hard on that draft. So I'm pleased for him that you liked his draft, because it's hard when you don't have a first and not much else.
Right, yeah, and I think that like the way that this draft is built, Curtis Weaver at 84 is a weird body type. Sadiq Charles at 109, he's got off-field issues. Julian Blackman at 126 is a corner transfer to safety, maybe transfer back to corner. 199, Davian Taylor has only been playing college ball at Power 5 level for 2 years, only played football altogether for about 5 years. There are a lot of really uncertain dudes, but when you have no first-round pick this year and next year, and you have no third-round pick and whatever, you got to swing for the fences a little bit on the picks you do have. You got to take the top guy on the board, even if they don't fit a mold or a profile. That's a lot of these guys. And so you're going to get a bust here and there, but you don't have high enough capital to draft safe. So I think it's also as appropriate just for the Rams where they are from a team-building perspective.
No, I agree. So based on that, then let's flip it to the other side. Who are some teams that you feel really dropped the ball here for whatever reason and didn't have as good a draft as perhaps they could or should have done?
Yeah, I struggle to get behind the Cardinals draft. I like Jedrick Wills at 8, and Cam Akers at 72 is good value, but I don't see how you need Akers with Kenyon Drake on the transition tag and with a head coach in Cliff Kingsbury. You can clearly get a lot out of less talented running backs. He's got a good running scheme, a good run design there. So I don't see the need for the pick with Akers, especially when you have so many needs on defense. And then when you go to fill the needs on defense, I don't love James Lynch as a player. I think he's all hustle, not a lot of skill, which means he's a good depth guy, but he's not going to win a starting job. Reggie Floyd really struggled this past season. His stock went way down throughout the course of the year. James Smith-Williams is a project. He's a lot more of a could be than it is right now. And so I don't think you're getting anything out of him in year one either. And then you grab a punter with your last pick. So Arizona's a tough one for me to get behind. The Baltimore trade up to 4 for Isaiah Simmons is totally nuts. I don't know who's manning the controls there. That was insane. No need to do that. Baltimore's in a good spot. You don't need to be mortgaging a whole draft for one player. All it takes is one, God forbid, camp injury, and you just, that's all your capital. The Dallas draft doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. Raekwon Davis at 28. Davis could be had a lot later than that. And what y'all need is pass rush. And that's the problem is you can't get after the passer. You have run defending defensive tackles. So I think Davis is redundant. And then Austin Jackson coming in, he's a tackle prospect through and through. So unless we're kicking Lyle Collins into guard, which there's no reason for us to be doing that, I don't see how Jackson sees starting time early either. So I like AJ Terrell. I like Devin Asiasi late a little bit, but the early picks for Dallas didn't make much sense to me at all. So those are a couple of ones I struggled with.
Yeah, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys was keen to point out that they obviously had Travis Frederick retire after they made like their second round picks. And it kind of would have changed the way that they would have done things, knowing that, because we kind of started this
timing wise. I got you. Yeah.
So what happened was we started this after the first week of free agency, so that had gone. All the major trades and all the major news had gone. So he starts his draft, and then he gets to the end of round 2, and then he gets the Travis Frederick as retired. That's why the Bengals, when they draft they draft a safety, and then Von Bell signed. That literally happened, I think, about 20 minutes after they made that pick.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, so there's a couple of, I think, luckily there wasn't much news, so there wasn't a ton that changed, but there was sort of one or two that did sort of throw up hinky. So yeah, for the Cowboys, that definitely sort of played a hand into they probably would have they would have definitely done things differently had they known they needed to replace Fredericks.
So, Benjamin, do you have a draft grade for all 32 teams so that people you haven't mentioned can find out how they did?
Yeah, I have a general one. You know what I mean? Like I scoped them out real quick. I didn't look too deep into the trades and who was left on the board, but I know who I like and who I don't.
Okay.
Cool.
You want me to just run them down?
Yeah, let's roll through them.
All right, so I didn't give anybody lower than a C- because I'm nice.
I would have loved you to absolutely slate people.
Nah. Not folks I don't know. If I knew you, maybe.
It's all right. I know him. You're fine to do it.
Yeah. Arizona, C. Atlanta, B-. Baltimore, C-. Buffalo, A+. Carolina, A-. Chicago, B. Cincinnati, B. Cleveland, B. Dallas, C. Denver, A-. Detroit, B+. Green Bay, B+. Houston, A-. Indianapolis, B-. Jacksonville, B-. Kansas City, B. Las Vegas, A-. Chargers, B+. Rams, A-. Dolphins, B. Minnesota Vikings, B. New England Patriots, B+. New Orleans Saints, A-. New York Giants, B+. New York Jets, A-. Philadelphia Eagles, B-. Pittsburgh Steelers, B. San Francisco 49ers, A-. Seattle Seahawks, B. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, B+. Tennessee Titans, C+. Washington Redskins, B-.
Nice. Very, very consistent grading then. I think there'll be a lot of folks pretty happy with their draft grades there. So appreciate you taking the time. It's obviously a lot of picks to go through. It's not like a one round or two rounder. So I really appreciate that. Just a couple of things from your perspective. Obviously, with this draft, you have a lot of grades and a lot of time spent in prospects. Is there, I mean, you've always said the Simmons pick was a bit wild in the trade up, but on the whole of the draft, do you think there was any big winners, like big steals? And then conversely, were there some players in here that might have been perhaps overdrafted, like in terms of their position, and perhaps could have been gotten around later, 2 rounds later?
Yeah, I think Henry Ruggs at 22 is wild for Minnesota. That's the steal of the draft for me. Ruggs has got as good a shot as any wide receiver to end up being the first off the board come, the actual draft here in April. For him to be the third wide receiver off the board and to make it past Denver and Philadelphia and New York and Jacksonville is nuts, right? And that's really crazy. And Minnesota, it's a huge pick for them. It changes the game for them. I liked those opening picks, Caleb Chasen and Ruggs, so much. And then I saw AJ Green at 89. I was like, oh dang, never mind. You know what I mean? Like that's a big time overdraft for me. AJ Green's a UDFA on my board. So the Vikings draft was up and down in that regards, but Ruggs stands out to me as one of the biggest steals in the draft. The guy who stands out as being overdrafted significantly, I brought up previously, but that's Raekwon Davis for Dallas. And I understand, trust me, I like Raekwon for what he is. I understand the appeal of Raekwon. I want Raekwon on my team. But there's a ceiling on Davis because he just does not have the physical quickness and explosiveness to be a pass rusher, a long-term 3-down pass rusher. And accordingly, there's just a ceiling on his projection that, when players like Ross Blacklock's still on the board, Neville Gallimore's still on the board, Justin Madubuike's still on the board, those have to be players you look at earlier than Raekwon because of what they can bring as a pass rusher. So he was the one who stood out to me as the big reach. Ruggs stood out to me as the big value pick.
Damn it.
Why?
No, just because he went past Denver, and I obviously don't value him quite as high as Benjamin does.
What don't you like about Ruggs?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I should have taken him and let Kinlaw go and fill the hole elsewhere.
I'll be honest. I'm not the biggest Ruggs guy. So I have him 4 on my board.
You called him the next Marquise Goodwin.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been burned too many times with speed guys in drafts, and everybody gets excited. And I appreciate he's got a few traits that make him a little bit different, but I just like for me, I like Lamb, I like Judy better, absolutely, and I like Jefferson better. I just think those guys have just got more. For me personally, they just seem to be more sticky prospects. I think Ruggs in the right situation could be incredible. I also am worried that he. But no. But I also think in the wrong situation, he'll be a Marquise Goodwin. He'll be another speedster or a John Ross who will take 3 or 4 years to break out, and then when he does, it's always too late.
Fair enough. Guys,
what do you think to that, Benjamin?
I'll put it to you this way. When you have a field stretcher to the caliber to which like a Marquise Goodwin or a John Ross is, let alone a Brandon Cooks or a Tyreek Hill or a John Brown, the effect that they have on the offense as a whole goes beyond what you can see on their stat sheet. So all I got to do is put a healthy Ruggs on the field, and that's going to change the foundation of your defensive approach, and it's going to allow me to do easier things on offense because of the speed that you have to respect. So Ruggs not only is a good route runner and good contested catches and physical and yak ability, and he gets after it, he's got a hot motor. Simply when that 4-8 steps foot on the field, I can now dictate coverages a lot easier, and that makes all 11 on my team better, not just Ruggs. So he brings a lot of value that goes outside of the box score.
That's fair.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that review a lot. So Murf, quick breaking news: the Bucks jerseys just dropped. What do you reckon?
Really happy with them. I love the red. It's a throwback to the more successful times. It's a slightly brighter red than the old sort of Super Bowl winning era jerseys. It's nice. The black lettering, the numbers are a lot cleaner, a lot nicer. It's just a really clean shirt. You're never going to be amazingly wowed by it. I think people are more wowed by it because they don't suck. I think that's more that it just doesn't suck, so it's good. I think if you were to sort of put it in a competition 20 years from now and talk about the best jerseys, it probably would never get mentioned, but I do like it because it's different, it's fresh, it's just not crap, which is a win. The white jersey, yeah. White jersey. I just don't get excited about white jerseys. They don't excite me. They're boring. Sorry if you're a big white jersey fan. Like, good luck to you. And too much like the Falcons for me, which if you got a divisional rival wearing them, that's a bit weird. But I love the pewter color rush. I think it's beautiful. It's unlike anything out there. You can't say they've stolen that from somewhere. Like it's amazing. It's completely different. It's unique. A little bit of orange on there. A little nod of the creamsicle. I'm a big fan of that jersey in particular. If it's not going for £150, then, and if you can get one, then I definitely will. Might have to get two because obviously I've got to get a Brady shirt, but I also said I'd get a VS shirt because I absolutely love the guy. So there might be two jerseys coming my way when all this is said and done.
Man, dropping some bombs over there.
Yeah. So back to Benjamin because he's clearly done an amazing job going through our draft. If you are listening to this and you didn't know we'd done this, on the website, we'll put a link in the show notes. You can go back and read the whole 7-round mock draft, and you can see every pick and see what we've been talking about. Probably should have done that at the beginning and said you should have stopped, read that, and then listened to this. But you can get the full details of how your team went on there if you missed all of that for whatever reason. But moving just slightly into the 2020 draft, Benjamin, because it is obviously going virtual. Does that what it's sort of someone who watches the tape and analyzes where players are going to go? Do you think that everything that's going on in the world is going to massively impact the draft? Not necessarily the event itself, because that's pretty obvious, but is there going to be players that are going to be taken very different positions this year because they've not done the medicals and there's other things going on in the interviews? I mean, how do you think it's all going to shake up?
Certainly, everybody's got their theory, and nobody actually knows because we ain't never done this before. This is as unprecedented as it gets. Now, what you will expect to see is teams will develop a strategy, push the strategy, and they won't be the same across the board. Some teams will go conservative. They'll pick exclusively seniors who they've done a year's worth of background info on, who they met at the Senior Bowl. They'll trade out of 2021 they'll trade out of 2020 for 2021 picks, and they'll look to focus on other drafts in which they feel like they have more certainty and a wider pool of players. Other teams will do the exact opposite. They'll acknowledge that there's a market inefficiency because some teams don't feel prepared for this draft. They'll rely on their scouting staffs. They'll make a ton of picks. They'll accumulate a ton of capital, and they'll spend it all this year thinking that there's going to be high-value juniors and guys with injury concerns much later in the draft than they usually are. And if you can even hit on one or two, well, then the other one's busting doesn't really matter. You just significantly improve your roster. So we don't know. There's going to be gambits. There's going to be strategy. We'll be able to figure out after, the first couple of rounds who's kind of going which way. Things are going to be weird. There's no doubt that things are going to be odd, and no one knows how to prepare well for this. The small schoolers who won't get their testing numbers out, you feel awful for them. Like that's the biggest thing is those guys being a UDFA and having good numbers to stand on and having face-to-face meetings with teams is so important to getting that first camp invite. then everything else from there is in your hands, and they're potentially losing out on that. That's the toughest part for me. In terms of the strat, it's just going to be, teams figuring it out as they go. Some will be aggressive, some will be conservative.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, never seen it before. I can't help but feel that your guys' mocks and analysis is almost more important, because I feel like it's going to be more accurate, because it's just watching tape. That's effectively all you've had, and a few conference calls and, the combine. But effectively, it's everything you've seen. There's not the things that you don't see that could happen and change people's opinions, other than the interviews. And I can't help but feel that this might be more, this is a prediction, I guess, on my side, is I think that this year might be more closer to the mocks and more closer to the analysis that you guys put out, because you're seeing the same things. There isn't a lot of difference. And I think it's going to be fairly similar. Whereas I know that you always get a surprise player who jumps up and a player who falls. And it happens every year. We always have someone who's a big faller, and it's always down to a medical defect that comes out late, or a character issue. I think Darius Geis should never have been as late as he was, but obviously he's not really panned out. But for the tan alone and those sorts of things, I don't think you're going to see those many swings this year. I don't know what you think to that.
I think that, yes, we're going to rely more on tape watchers, but also I think we're going to learn how different tape watchers can be. You know what I mean? Like, it's not as if everybody watches tape and comes away with the prospect on the same value, let alone the same evaluation, right? And so teams are going to rely on their scouts. Teams are going to rely on the guys who put in the hours in the film room, and they're going to be prepared to recommend players. But there's still going to be debates and disagreement. There's still going to be overdrafts and underdrafts, because people are going to watch tape differently.
Awesome. Do you think there is a draft scenario likely or even remotely possible that Joe Burrow isn't the number one pick? Or is this the biggest sort of consensus number one we've had in the last, 10 years or so?
I mean, like, not in the last 10 years, but the Bengals have liked Burrow more than Tua since before Tua even got hurt. And now Tua's hurt. So there's the whole, there's some of them who like Justin Herbert. I'm sure there are, because they scouted him in the summer and they liked him. But it's Burrow. And I would be absolutely flabbergasted if it were anything else.
Okay. And then in terms of draft night for you guys do, you did the event last year with TDN. Is that a similar thing you'll be doing this year? Obviously, it'd be more challenging remotely, or what is your plans for the draft nights and the rest of the draft? How are you going to be watching it or doing things for it?
That cannot yet be revealed, I'm afraid.
Oh.
We have stuff in the works, because obviously we usually do a live show on location. That's not available to us this year. We'll be making an announcement fairly soon as to the new plan. So you just have to keep your eyes peeled for that, man.
Oh, I will be. Don't worry. I'm excited for that. I've still yet to decide what I'm going to do for the draft. Last year, I was in a fairly new job. So felt it important to go to work. And so I taped the draft and then watched it the morning, having turned off all of the notifications and absolutely everything. And then I was texting Stocks and I was live reacting. And he's like, yeah, I know, I've seen this. And I was like, oh my God, fans gone to the Broncos. What's going on? I don't know what I'm going to do this year with COVID. And
I'll tell you what I'm doing. I am watching the damn thing, because I am not at work.
Well, yeah. Although childcare that day is going to be harder.
Nah, that'll be fun.
Benjamin, it's been a lot of fun. I have one final question for you. And that simply is, can you give us a really, really spicy hot take for this 2020 NFL draft?
If I were the Redskins, I'd draft Jeffrey Okudah at 2 over Chase Young.
Whoa. Really?
For me, Okudah is graded as a blue chip prospect. Chase Young is graded as a blue chip prospect. They have no corners, no starters right now. They got Fuller, who's a slot. They got Jimmy Moreland, who's also a slot. They got Fabian Moreau, who used to play the slot and is now backup. And they've got Montez Sweat, Ryan Kerrigan. Ryan Anderson, I know, is on a contract year. Kerrigan, they might want to cut, but they don't need Young nearly as badly as they'd need Okudah. And for me, they're equivalent graded players. So Okudah would make more sense to solving their immediate problems.
And so do you think they're going to do that? Or is there a chance?
No chance. They're taking Chase Young. This is Ron Rivera. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to take in the trenches. But if it were me, I would at least strongly consider the option.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough.
I'm annoyed I wrote a mock draft last night because I would have loved to have slid that in before publishing the podcast.
You can't steal someone else's idea.
No, I would have credited him and said, listen to the podcast. I wouldn't have stolen Benjamin's idea.
Fair enough.
I do like it, though. I do like it. Yeah. Benjamin, man, this has been a whole boatload of fun. We really appreciate you coming on. Would you like to let Rush Nation know where they can find your podcast and all about the TDN?
Sure, yeah. So if you're looking to be a draft fan, if you are a draft fan, you don't know, thedraftnetwork.com, at the Draft Network on Twitter. Those are the spots for the Draft Network. As the guys alluded to, myself and another TDNer, Trevor Sickaba, host the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, which you can find on any app podcasts are. We cover the NFL Draft 365. So we have a good time. This is obviously our heyday. Right now we're in the middle of our own respective beat mock, where we have beat writers for each individual team come answer some questions about their team and make a pick in a mock draft for us. That's going on. It's a fun episode. I believe we referred to it earlier. But anyway, that's my pod. That's the Draft Network for mock draft simulator for all of our draft articles for our live coverage as well. That's the spot, man. It's the time of the year. 'Tis the season.
Don't forget the premium plug as well.
Oh yeah, give me your money. And if you do, I will give you access to the TDN Expert Forum and trades in the mock draft machine, our portfolio content, which is all now being released upon you in a deluge in the month of April, including my contextualized quarterbacking and Kyle's prospectus and all of our team-specific draft guides. Those are all available to you with premium as well. So if you go to thedraftnetwork.com/TDN-premium, you'll be able to see the full offering there. If you have any questions, I'm on Twitter at Benjamin Solak. You can always hit me up.
Absolutely. And plus you and Trevor and the gang are all on the Slack channel you get access to as well.
Yeah, which is that expert forum's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. So there's been a few mocks I've been in as a part of being part of that. It's been a bit wild being on the clock, and it's been hosting America and stuff. So it's been a lot of fun. This has been incredible. I've absolutely loved this episode. Would love you to come back on again well after the draft is settled and you've had some well-deserved rest, and we can sort of reflect and look at it. But it's been a real pleasure to have you on.
I appreciate it, fellas, and thanks for having me. I'll be sure to hit you back up.
Definitely.
Amazing. Love that. Thanks, Benjamin, for coming on. Murf, as always, big man, this has been a lesson in life and football. And I might speak to you later on in the week. Rush Nation, you might hear from us, you might not. COVID dependent. But as always, don't forget, keep rushing.
I'll give him my game check. He makes it.
Hold your breath. Ball is spotted. The kick is away. And the kick is... It's gone!